just chatting post-Synod, which just wrapped up like a few minutes ago for the CRC. And man, did it wrap up in a very interesting way.
I have no idea what happened, but you should probably tweet the stream to the CRC Synod. You know what?
I did.
I'll do it in some hashtag.
Yeah, I tweeted Synod. I have a little bit of a Discord between a bunch of Calvin seminarians, and so I shared it there too. We've had
CRC Voices.
I didn't do it on Voices. Maybe I should. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of fogies up in CRC Voices that I don't know how interested I am on getting their takes. But yeah, no, today was a heck of a day. So today was an interesting day for me because I was looking forward to hearing what would come out of today, because today they were supposed to talk about the gravamen and the appropriate way to do that. Unfortunately,
They didn't?
I think some poor managing on the side of the chair, and that there was a kind of almost like a filibuster being done by the minority side. And so the important portion of that was tabled until next year, which is like, seriously, like that's a huge question that people have. And instead of just pushing it through, it was kind of like, let's have a debate, and it was allowed to go on for much longer than it ought to have, while people kind of whined and listened to their stories. And yeah, it was, I felt like the other days, outside of, all the complaining and stuff, sob stories that were told on the floor throughout the past few days, I felt like things were at least progressing. And then it's like today, it was just like, I felt like the chair just let himself get played. And whether that was intentional or unintentional, I don't know. But it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mind. Lance, here's the... Oh, I'm sorry. I put the wrong link. My bad. I was linked to the YouTube channel rather than the joining.
I put it.
Oh, you just put it there. So yeah, Lance, you can click that link now and join if you like. But
so,
yeah, what else?
So basically, what you're saying is the classes that are affirming doctrinal sin of sexuality are basically nothing's been done then.
So the decisions were made that, hey, this is our position. We're holding fast. If you're not in line with this position, you merit discipline and so forth and that. But there's
no discipline.
But yeah, it seems like, well,
okay,
that's just leave on their own, kind of.
That's like me. That's like me saying to my daughter, if you do this one more time,
it's the devouring mother. That's what it is.
Wow,
it's the devouring mother.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
That was a great thing about my mom back in the day. There wasn't like one more time. There was just a swat. There was the hand of God, or she had the whip, So so in essence, what happened is everybody does their fake whining. Nothing happens, and they can whine for another year because conservatives, or at least whoever they are, doesn't understand the function of when you have a organization get together. The chair should be smart enough to say, or someone from the crowd should say, call the question.
Yeah. Did you watch, Hank?
I've been involved in politics. I was elected official for 8 years, so I know when people are stonewalling, playing games, trying to filibuster. And you learn very quickly, if you have the votes, you just say, call the question.
Well, I was shocked. And by the way, I was really impressed by President DeVries throughout the process. But it's kind of like when you think your quarterback's doing great and then he throws the pick six at the end of the game to lose it for you, right? Like what he allowed. So I was taking some notes and it totally flipped on its head with the debacle I saw that he allowed to happen at his synod as the president this afternoon. Because if you would keep track of the floor time throughout the whole week, he took the 3-minute clock off and he allowed people, and it was 75 to 80% of the minority. There was a super majority, like when they let it come out, it was 70 to 26% earlier today. Okay. So he kept, and I kept, my immediate thought was, boy, how generous is of him just to let them to continue to speak and speak. They weren't speaking to the motion. They weren't speaking whether they were for or against. And he was just allowing this to go on and on and on. But now what became obvious to me, Hank, like I've watched this, I'm a lawyer. I'm like, holy cow. He allowed them to run out the clock. So when the important matters, today was the day where the teeth would come into discipline. And then he came off. Then he came off because he was the in loco committee that was supposed to be meeting with this Neelan that basically says we're not going to do it and we're ordaining the people or whatever. And he came off and said, hey, if you guys put this discipline in place, this is done. They're going to leave, because he knows they're never going to submit to the confessions, despite where they would say, oh, we'll agree to the confessions, we won't teach, but they were taking away any ability to have any discipline. And then when they got to the end, and I'm realizing this, I'm going, they're not going to vote to these things. And then the perfect tactic, by the way, I'd give the minority this. We've seen this happen a lot in politics, right? And particularly, I would just say the woke. They invoked the we aren't being heard after they've been heard all week, right? Threw a fit. They were going to walk away. They were going to take their ball and go home. After committee spent months and weeks preparing all of this, right? And it gets to the critical moment of synod, and they punt. He allowed it to be punted. Now, either he's incompetent, and I watched this man. He is not an incompetent man. He is not an incompetent man. He knew exactly what the threat was happening. You could have got people on board because the will was obvious. They were going to vote for discipline. And I'm going to tell you this. If I were there trying to be in good graces to do this and do this, next year, like, this is not going to tamp down. I've seen this through like the Methodist Church denominations. They just sent it to an 11, because if you were part of the 70% that did all the work and the will of the people were going to be doing it, it's like when they stopped voting on election nights. We've seen this happen, okay? They allowed themselves to throw a tantrum, and the minority stopped it. It was, if I were part of the CRC, I'd be livid. I'm not. This was just watching this. But it was shocking, the failure of the president and that executive committee to not allow Synod 2023 to do their job.
Let me just say, we have like 20 people watching on Twitter. I'm guessing they're completely new to this. They aren't interested from the Synod side, from the CRC side. So this is mostly on YouTube. It is also available on Twitter. But if you want to get involved in the chat, come on YouTube and you can chat with the other people who are in the chat, and we can include those in there, your views. Also, if you want to come on StreamYard, please turn on your camera and come on StreamYard. I'll probably ask you some questions in the private chat before we let you on, just to make sure we're not getting any sort of bombings, but as in photo bombings. You can join this discussion. I have so much to say, but I'm going to shut up. I will just say Nick really nailed it here. This is going to have huge repercussions in terms of women in office. And I would not be surprised if at least some CRC churches are looking for the other denominations to join today.
All right. Well, so let's actually do something. Let's compare what happened with the SBC, which a bigger, huger guy, Rick Warren, did a full court press. So let's talk about Rick Warren for a while. He's known with people who follow evangelical that he'll find his own interpretation of the Bible. There's like 20, 30 different Bibles, and he'll find the one that fits what he's trying to talk about. He's the worst exegete I've ever seen in my life, okay? He's a disgrace. And all of a sudden, he has found that No, through his exegesis, women are supposed to be pastors. It's amazing. After 2,000 years, the man, and he put a full court pressure on the SBC. And what do? They voted 80-19. Sorry, you're out of here. Okay. They took care of business. Okay. The CRC's been going through this for a long time. And this is what happens when people don't understand the political nature. They always want to see things on a spiritual nature or ecclesiastical or something, but there's a politics here. And at the end, remember at the beginning, I said, what you do when you know you have the votes is you say, call the question.
Mm-hmm. And that had been done all week. That was happening pretty regularly all week.
We're done with the debate. We've had the debate. We can vote. And if you want to take your cards and go home, God bless you. I'm not going to whine about this. I have the votes. You don't have the votes. And you know what? You can cry, you can whine, okay? But that's how it works. And the problem is that this is bad parenting. It's bad parenting from top to bottom. We need to let our kid express themselves. Now, when my child is yelling at a Walmart, the expression is, we're going to get you out of the Walmart because this is a disgrace. That's not how you act. And of course they play these games, okay? That's just sort of how it goes. I mean, we see this wokeism all the time. It really is. It's just a 4-year-old child having a temper tantrum. You're not giving me my way. You're not giving me what I want.
Okay, but the problem, Hank, cannot be that the fact that children are having temper tantrums.
Yeah.
It's that we have 0 adults in the room.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. And I am very, very surprised that this person that Paul praised so highly apparently decided to completely roll over. And it seems like the best I can say about him is he has no idea what kind of backlash he is engendering with this type of behavior.
So here's where I would give him in good faith. The one thing that's different about the CRC, so I was part of the Methodist Church, which from a mainline perspective was the largest, in the United States. We didn't have that real familial Calvin College, the schools. It was a small enough denomination that everyone really knew each other. And so there's more of an impulse that I get to try and keep this. There's a deeper impulse to try and keep this together than you see in other, I think, denominations.
Which is beautiful.
Which is beautiful. I think ultimately, just me watching it from the political side, what I could see was happening was they were going to allow them to give them the chance to be heard because the majority was hardly ever speaking. They were just quiet. They did try to call the question, but I think they had faith that, okay, we're going to allow this to happen in good faith because, again, what happens when you push against these things? You're a bigot, right? You're a bigot. You're transphobic. You're this or that. You're not listening. You're not hearing. It's everything else. And so I think they had faith that in the end, that the executive committee would bring this to bear and allow these votes to happen, and they got hoodwinked. And their good faith.
Well, I think that's the problem. Is they're continually getting hoodwinked because they keep the pattern has been established, and it's like, at what point are you purposely being blind? And the other thing that bothered me, and Phlebas brought this up when he talked with Jacob last night a bit, is they're fighting for their own. And that bothers me a little bit because there's all this talk about inclusion, and you have, a big segment of the denomination, or a larger segment of the denomination now than it's ever been, Consejo Latino, filled with Latinos that were very much speaking out in support of the majority here.
The Koreans, the Latinos, all the minorities were coming out and saying,
and I kept pointing this out to people on Twitter. There was this girl, Rebecca something or other, and I said, yeah, because she kept saying a bunch of white men, and I was like, yeah, wait to ignore all the Latinos and the Koreans. Way to live the stereotype, Becky. Never responded. And of course, and I did it to several people because they don't care about the diversity that they say that they do. They're lying. and they care about their own, and they're really pushing for that, and it's remarkably obvious.
Well, to be fair, I would say this, to be fair, they absolutely in their heart of hearts believe that it's married to their thing. They believe it. They're true believers. Okay. They're convinced of it.
It's their gospel.
It is. When pride is more important than pride, and I'm just going to say it, when that becomes the thing that has to be your calling card, right? And again, the way that the 70% that voted this morning, they finally wanted to get the void. It was 70 to 26%. 70% of the delegates basically were voting to go down the confessionalist road today. The way that they got outworked and outmaneuvered in this Synod, like Hank, if you were here, and they tried to call the question, and there was a lot of back and forth. The president gave way too much leeway all week, because I was noticing, I'm like, why are you allowing these people on Tuesday and Wednesday night to have all this leeway to go on and on and on? And I was noticing, Nick is in here, I kept noticing the minority is taking up all the time and the majority is being silent. The word filibuster was used by one of the minority delegates.
By the way, that happens in politics all the time. When you don't have the votes, you yap. Okay, you guys are. By the way, Moises, I want to say you guys are bad Calvinists. You don't understand total depravity.
Well, a lot of these guys do. I mean, this is the thing that keeps pointing back to us. They keep saying,
come on. I told you,
there.
Jacob, I was going to start trolling, okay? But I'm trolling you see my face. Look, I'm going to say this to the CRC. Your next president has to have some kind of political background, male or female, it doesn't matter. What happens is, if I was there in the group, and I used to do this before I was the president of elected board, if I knew we had the votes and some guy was just filibustering, I just finally say, call the question. Do I hear a second? Right?
Well, but
and you get the second and you do it.
No, let me understand. I think, didn't they put the slate for next year's Senate? Because the conservative guys were wanting to stop this vote. I think the slate for next year was approved. Was that approved?
No. That's not what was approved. But
okay.
Okay. So this is what I hate, which is we have this idea in our mind that never ascribe to maliciousness or malintent what can be explained through negligence. There's a level at which, I'm sorry, like Paul Vanderklay told me he knew this guy was going to be the president of the Synod because he knows how this stuff works. And throughout the week, it seemed like he did know that he wasn't incompetent. And suddenly we end up, I'm very surprised to find out that Synod tabled this.
Yes. And it's one of the more important aspects too. This is not a small thing that was tabled. Like I went back and forth with the guy on Twitter that he was actually kind of kind, but he was like, I'm just finishing Fuller and now I have to leave this denomination. And I responded to him, you should have known this a year ago. And his response to me was, but I had hope. And
I saw that.
I felt bad for him because I'm like, that hope was given to him by these moderates that are just trying to please. And I feel like that hope was given again.
Yes, it's been reaffirmed. That's the thing.
Here's the thing that's happened. And I could tell because I didn't have a fight in this game. But Hank, any of us who have been around long enough have seen what just happened and maybe, fool me once. I'm going to tell you next year, because here's all this. Let's just take this off the table. We tried the nice way and the 70% majority was thwarted. This is going to get worse. And next year, really, this is the fight that's going to go on. Mm-hmm. Who gets to remain in the CRC and who wants to lose? The time they want is they want to be able to see. That's the fight that's going to come on. A marriage is over long before a divorce is filed. They are divorced. There's no way to bring these together. Mm-hmm. And I think those who had hope that maybe they could work something out that would keep it, that's been broken. And the 70% that were voting there next year, if I'm them, I'm saying, hey guys, this is just, we're preparing for Synod 2023. We're going to have our ducks in a row. and we're going to actually have discipline against our confessions. They're going to try and delay, talk, wait till they can get their numbers up. So hopefully they can grab the power of the denomination. What in the divorce, you're going to divvying up the assets. And this is really what's going to happen. And this is what happens in every Protestant denomination that's had this divorce. Do the progressives keep it and force the traditionalists, or the traditionalists keep it? And who gets to keep the house?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Let's just cut through all the bullshit. That's the game that's being played right now.
Yep.
And India, well, they love and they this. Now, I saw too much on display. I can see right through it, and that's the game that's being played in that church right now.
Well, and the other aspect of it is, and I wonder about this because I'm really suspicious of Paul DeVries right now. Is he knew, just like everybody knew, that if this doesn't go the way the conservatives want, the denomination is dead, because all the conservative churches are like, we're not dealing with this, and so he waited till the very end so that it looks like, hey, we kind of won this, and it's like there's part of me that's like, I don't know if I want to be here anymore.
He stepped in at the end saying, if we do this, we're going to force Neeland out. So he stood at the defense of Neeland.
At the expense of everybody else.
Right.
Yes.
By the way, the church is still going to split up. I'm telling you.
Yep.
No, he's not incompetent. That man's not incompetent. He could have made sure the business got done. And
Yep.
he did not allow it to get done. A president can make sure the business gets done. A competent president. He was competent. I'm going to tell you, if I were on the other side, I've seen it too many times. By the way, lawyers, we figure out how to play these games. Half the battle in legal battles is time. Bleed people out, work the angles, try to figure out the right timing to do this. I saw that happen, and either he's incompetent or he's I got to say, the way today went down, I would have felt like I got knifed in the back by Paul DeVries if I was a delegate.
Look, let me give you an example. And I've seen this when I worked with Senator Peter Fitzgerald, Congressman Hyde, and others, right? People are going to come to you and give you, they want you, the way to change your vote is they'll personalize an issue, okay? And you have to be strong enough to say, I understand, but I disagree, and we're going to move on. And you have to do something that people don't like. It's very difficult. You're going to have to be disliked. You're going to have someone say, you know, that Paul DeVries is really a bad guy, and he doesn't affirm LGBTQ people, and he's a big meanie, and all these things that you hear. And I've seen it, right? But here's the thing: when you break faith, no one can trust you anymore.
Right.
You're done. You are absolutely done. One of the things I was taught by Congressman Hyde, this is over 30 years ago, is when I shake my hands with Dan Rostenkowski to cut a deal, the deal's done. So you had the number one Democrat, and you had Ronald Reagan's Republican, which was Henry Hyde. Henry Hyde was the first guy to support Reagan in 1980. So Reagan would use Hyde to deal with Rostenkowski. And one thing I learned by sitting at that guy's foot is you make a deal, you keep that deal. Even if everybody else is yelling at you, you keep the deal. And Paul DeVries didn't keep the deal. What he did was he punted. And so now everybody like Mo, who was basically on the DeVries side, goes, you're untrustworthy. I can't trust you. And he has to go. And quite frankly, if I was a CRC, I'd call a special synod and say, we got to finish this up. Or if you don't do it, you don't have a church anymore. Because if I'm a conservative CRC pastor and church, I'm out. I'm done.
I don't know DeVries, and I don't want to make this personal, but if he didn't have a Dutch last name, I don't think this would have happened. Because we know that the hammer was going to come down on Dutch toes. Mm-hmm. And that's what, like, if the actual minorities, if the Koreans and the Hispanics and the Blacks and the people who are in that church because of the confessions, not because they were born into it, not because they're cousins or they wanted to be in a Dutch community, but because they actually believe in the confessions, if the hammer was coming down on them, then I really doubt this type of leeway would be given.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would, here's the thing that I would say, which I know this, like, I would bet my life that if I know, I would just make, I would make this. He's a man of extremely high character and integrity, and he loves the CRC. And because of that familial small, I know, like, I just get a sense a lot, like, you know, Paul would love to see this, try and figure out some way. But a year ago, when he saw the numbers, he started to try and prepare people. He saw what had happened very clearly, right? And I think the best thing I can give to him is if it had gotten done better. But man, when he came to the floor today and took the teeth out of the Neeland Avenue discipline, and then to allow this stuff to happen, and he was removed from the chair. But I think his best hope is today, with those votes happened, the split would have happened because Neeland was not going to go along with it. You would have had the split in the church. I think in his best interest is if we give this time, maybe something better could happen. But the backlash from the 70% of the supermajority, it's just like you said it, Jacob, in the comments. He kicked the can, and I think he thought maybe kicking the can would maybe be in the best interest potentially. But this is only going to get, like, this just took it to another level. This broke all faith. Not just in him, but amongst the sides. Now, the minority is ecstatic. They were clapping when the first thing got defeated, which was going to take away the discipline from Neeland. Why were they clapping? Because they know Neeland's not going to go along with any of this. Come on,
that was for me. When I saw that, I was like, this guy doesn't have a spine. He felt the heat and he cowered, and he backed down. And I mean, I see this happen all the time. It's like, yeah, we're going through this, and what got me is that not only did he speak, but then people voted along with it as well, and that shows me. I was like, And again, I think there were people that were like, just okay, well, maybe I trust this guy. We can do more. I don't know why they voted the way that they voted.
Well, when you're the president all week and you have this gravitas, and then you come down on the floor and you make this issue. I mean, basically, he said, if I go to do this, they're going to have to leave, because he knew he was the local committee. He knew that they were not going to, they're not giving into these confessions. Yes. They're not going to follow. Mm-hmm. So he was saying, guys, this is going to force them out today. And I think I was really surprised that vote didn't go through, which was interesting. But I think some people figured out what happened, and they were going to come up and finish the job with the committee 8 to add some teeth. And as soon as that happened, it got punted. And so they're in a mess. I'm just going to tell you, if you're the CRC, it's a mess. Now, I want to give credit where credit is due. Man, when you can play the game the way the minority played the game this week and today, and threatened to take their ball and go home, and got the emotions up and got this tabled, God bless them. What a great tactical. I think it's dirty tactics, but those are the tactics. That
it really destroys the trust, because now not only don't I trust, well, I never trusted them, but I have so little faith in, there's a spectrum, right? There are affirmers, there are conservatives, and there's all these moderates. There were moderates that were like moderately conservative. I have no trust for them anymore. I don't feel like they have the backbone to do what needs to be done. And I'm not sure where the Korean segment of our denomination stands, but I feel like they've probably lost a lot of trust in these people as well. And it's because it's basically like, yeah, we see you, but we don't care, because these are our kids, these are our grandkids, these are our cousins, and blood is thicker than water. And I'm like, that's not what I signed up for.
But if you're trying to grab the ring of power from a minority position, this thing gives them the ability to try and maybe force other. Listen, they're fighting over the house, and they want the keys to the house. They want to win. Mm-hmm. And if you just shake the box up enough and try and hope you can kind of wait some time and bide some time and win some people over, it was a genius play by the minority.
But the irony is they're using racism to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then the minorities would get up, like the Korean guy said, I just want to speak for us. It's like traditional values. There was an Arab guy. It's like, we don't even understand these questions. Like, it's tradition. this is a whim. This gender ideology is a spirit of the age that exploded in the last 15 to 20 years. A church changing always held beliefs and confessions. Because here's the other thing, like I pointed out, the speeches I'm hearing them given, those are the same speeches that I hear from atheists and the people that are against the church and everything else. The tactics are the same tactics. They were basically forcing a minority struggle session on everyone, right? Who are godly people and care about the body and are grieving over their church. So they were doing these forced struggle sessions. And I saw, like, on Tuesday, white supremacy was mentioned. Like, if you look at a lot of these overtures, it's about all the racism and the misogyny. Like, they have all the buzzwords in the language. And it was like the culture war came, like, it's so easy to see when you're watching it as an observer from the outside. This is, and by the way, here's what conservatives know. You give them an inch, and then all of a sudden you're down on your knees in a DEI training to have to submit to their affirming. Trust me,
a lot of the language was
every
like that.
time.
That's why the backlash.
Well, if we just give them this, they'll come around. If we just give them this, and it's like it never works that way.
The backlash is going to be furious.
You give them nothing. It's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory that I grew up on. You get nothing. It's okay. It's sometimes that's what you have to do, and they didn't do that. And here's the funny thing. The funny thing is that they're done. And here's the issue. I've watched Paul Vanderklay on this. He's grieving the CRC. He's that Dutch remnant, right? So my grandfather came from Germany. Okay. So what happened to my dad? You learn German. Everything was about the German. And then when I grew up, I had to take German. Guess what? My daughter took Spanish and Latin. There was no German. I'm an American. My dad asked me one time, do you remember any of the German you were taught in school? No. I didn't care. Okay. What's happened is it's this Dutch thing because it came from the Netherlands, right? But you have now it's a tree that's had grafted branches. Moises is a perfect example of a grafted branch, right? And the branches are looking at the tree saying, you guys are nuts. You guys are crazy. And, well, we got to keep our family together. No, actually, we don't if the family's going to be destroyed by keeping the axe murderer in the shed around. They got to go. And I think that what you have is how can I've seen the moderates in the church in other ways, right? How can we all work together? You have to have a belief. I don't have the belief that the side that's got the issues wants to work in good faith. They don't want to work in good faith. They want Mo and Hank and Jacob and everyone else to tolerate what they believe in. They want you to accept and celebrate what they believe in.
Yep.
And that's why you're seeing the backlash. The backlash isn't sort of the libertarian live and let live. It's now they're doing what the moral majority did 40 years ago. And it's more onerous than what the moral majority did 40 years ago. And in a church setting, you either have confessions and beliefs or you have MSNBC. Or, you don't have
you don't have a denomination.
You have nothing. You have nothing. What you have is bromides. Give you a good example. My attorney's sister is gay. She's a Presbyterian minister. She calls herself a hospice worker for dying Presbyterian churches. And one time I asked her, why are they dying? She looked at me. I said, I can tell you why they're dying. Because your belief system is no different than what I would get from watching Rachel Maddow. There's no difference. Of course they're dying. Because why should I pay any money to go and hear what I could hear for free on MSNBC or the New York Times? Okay? And where's the challenge? A church, orthodoxy challenges us to say what you are is not what you ought to be. You're not enough. You need to be better, right? Okay. Now, as a Christian, I believe that the only way is through the Holy Spirit makes me better. But if I sit there and say I'm going to be colonized by the world, then there's no need for me to go to church. And so I think that
Okay,
I said this to Paul, and I'll leave it at this. I said this to Paul. They will be gone. The affirming church will be gone in 10 years. It won't exist.
So it is possible to have a church of the woke if that's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
There are woke churches here in Los Angeles, right? And if you want to worship at that altar, you can. It's possible. But that's not anything that's going on in the CRC, right? Their confessions are not woke confessions. So the question becomes, why are you a member of this church? And there are two reasons. A, I believe in the confessions of this church. Or B, I'm Dutch.
Yep.
Or
that's
just
what
even
the
if you're
minority is
Dutch, that's the
pushing back
church of my family, right?
Yeah, that's what the minority is. I was baptized here. I was baptized in a church too. I'm not there anymore because my beliefs are more in line with this denomination, and so I've moved. And it's so insane to me. You know, one of the other seminarians that I'm with, who's also a CRC pastor, is like, he's also not Dutch. He's like, I'm pretty sure what happened with Paul was he did the Dutch thing and just tried to avoid extremes. And it's not about what I believe, it's what I'm trying to avoid. And I think age is part of it as well. You have a bunch of, I don't want to be, I've been part of this denomination so long, and I don't want to be the one responsible for kneeling going. And it's like, you're not responsible. They're responsible. We've provided a pathway for them. They're not choosing it. That's on them. You can't hold yourself responsible. But there's a lot of these guys that are older. Well, we've gotten along for so long.
Honestly, that seems like such a temporal way of looking at the world, right? It's not my problem.
It is.
I'll die, and then and without actually looking at the eternal consequences, actually caring about things in a manner of, okay, I am here in this church. And frankly, I was really inspired by that discussion that there was earlier about, like, what are we here for? And that vote that got overturned. Although I guess I should have noticed that the committee, like, it's very much like what happened with the SBC with that. If you guys remember, there was an overture made to the SBC to condemn CRT. And the committee tried playing these games. And what the question became, hey, who was on this committee? And apparently that's the type of game that the committee tried to play with the synod that got overturned. Pastor Vander, some Dutch name, right, goes to Washington. And that was inspiring. That made me think, oh, okay, they're going to actually get to business. They're actually going to be a confessional church as opposed to an ethnic church. And it's just an ethnic church. That's what it said. That's what Synod said. We are an ethnic church.
Yeah, I feel like what Synod's trying to do is they're trying to straddle the fence. They're trying to play both sides. No, yeah, exactly. We want to welcome, but we still love our kids more than you. I mean, I grew up in a household like that.
I'm going to keep holding this because I listened to every minute of this thing. Okay, so I'm a nerd, but it was also a window into what's really happening in society today too, and what's happening in the churches or whatever. And there was an overwhelming majority that continued to do this. It was a wild outcome that the minority had so much power. And really what happened, but this happens across the spheres. It's weaponized compassion. That's what it's weaponized compassion. And Christians are particularly susceptible to weaponized compassion. Jacob would say it's because we idol worship love. But that idea is it's weaponized compassion. And by the way, if you're a person who does care about this, your parents built the churches and did cleanup weekends, and there's a lot of emotion and connection that's tied into that. And they used every string they could pull, but I was, again, shocked that kind of a majority got took behind the woodshed like they did this week.
Well, one of the comments was about the boomers, and I'm sort of the end of the boomers. But I couldn't agree more. It's the boomers. Hey, man, my kid, all this participation trophy, all this nonsense, right? I wasn't raised by the greatest generation. I was raised by the silent generation. My dad fought in Korea. There was none of this toleration, okay? Which, of course, it was made clear to me when I married my lovely wife that I could be quite intolerant. Yeah. Sometimes I can be quite intolerant, because when you're not intolerant of some things, you have chaos. I'm a big believer in order.
So perfect example from Twitter. Time to be adults in response to someone's real and visible emotion. Some people have absolutely no compassion for the trauma being perpetuated. Let's not ignore the misogyny. That the comment was made by a man in response to a woman's emotion. Yeah. CRC Synod.
Yes.
I responded.
Perfect example.
I responded to it by saying, you don't know what trauma is. I know what trauma is. I think she took it off, but I'll tell you what trauma is. Listen to my father-in-law talk about Pork Chop Hill and fighting on that hill for 5 days. Right. I know about trauma from talking to my dad and what he went through.
And I know trauma. What Nick was saying.
I know trauma for working at Capini Green and watching someone get shot. Okay, trauma isn't when someone says something mean to me. Okay, that is not trauma.
It's misogyny for a man to disagree with a woman's emotions.
Yeah. You know what? What's good for sometimes for a man to say is, no, I'm not buying your emotional manipulation. Mm-hmm. Okay, you're not going to manipulate me. Sorry, because I understand that's a power that you have that I don't have. We're gonna meet eye to eye, face to face, and we're gonna fight this out. Now, I fight this out because that's what love is. Love is we're gonna have to maybe not like each other for a while. Love isn't me saying that we're seeing this. Love is being gender affirming until you start seeing people who transitioned coming back saying, why did you let this ever happen to me? How dare you? I was a 13-year-old girl and I was autistic. I am autistic. I'm watching these people. That's not love. It's horrible. Okay. We have a weird idea of what love is. And I think that it really sets me up because we either have boundaries on the truth. We can go back, Jacob might disagree with me there. In the Old Testament, in the very first part of the Old Testament, in Genesis, God says, don't eat of this tree, but he tells us we can eat of every other tree. We forget that he also said, you got the rest of this place, you can live large and be in charge. And it's just not this one tree. It's when I say don't do this doesn't mean that you don't get to do anything. But when a church sits there and says love, God's love is love, I think it's not love. It means you really just don't care and you don't want to get in a fight. You don't want to have an upset stomach.
When God is love, you are arguing against love.
What was fascinating about that moment, Jacob, is when it happened. So again, having listened to to listen to these people, I'm just going to say 70% of the time was taken to drone on and on and on and on for 3 days, filibustering. They got heard and reheard, repeating the same stuff. There were all these sub barbs going out from their sides, misogynist, race, like this stuff, white supremacy, like all that stuff's pointed directly at certain people, right?
Yeah.
But the minorities would come on and basically disagree with it. Let's face it, it was the white privileged people that have all this, all this knowledge about what is racism and misogyny and everything else. But at the end here, when she got up, and she spoke a lot, when she got up and tried to play that card as if they weren't being heard, I was like, are you kidding me? And so that man says, let's be adults. What he said was right. Now, he had to come back then, and then he apologized to her for saying that. And she's on the floor and whatever. I'm sorry. That's true. You are a delegate at Senate. This is an important thing. You have a job to do. We heard over and over and over and over and over and over all week for days, the same dribble you've been going on and on about. We understand your position. We've heard you. Now let's act.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden, then people played the game. They take the ball and go home. Well, I'm leaving and I'm leaving. They knew they were going to lose, and they caused a big commotion. And again, with weaponized compassion, got people to stop what they were doing. If I were the president at that moment, I'm saying, listen, we've heard this. We've discussed this. We know what's on the table. We're adults. We know what we're voting for. We're going to vote for what the business of this is in. You could have gotten those votes in, and everyone had plenty of time to comment on them. And if they want to do an overture next year, they can, but I would have moved the business ahead. But it happened. That was the moment that broke me, to where, having spent so much time invested in this, and I just figured if I would have been a CRC person, that's the moment. I'm just going to say, like, no, you're there, but lots of other people were there. That's the moment where I think it broke the trust. It broke everything, and people, and what you've got now, and I know this is going to happen to CRC. I've seen it before. It's game on now.
Yes. Yep.
It's game on. It's no longer we're going to do this or that, or we need to work to strive.
Well, if you're in a conservative CRC church, right? How can you trust anything that's coming now from a synod? Oh, we're going to do it next time. We really mean it next time. We double really mean it next time. Yeah.
If I'm there, my first thing I fight, if I'm these conservatives, I'm going to say, we are bringing Committee 8 up. No, here are the findings. We're bringing this up, and and they'll have the majority. I would get our work done as fast as could be and get that right back on the floor, so we talk about it at the very beginning. Listen, there's tactical ways to get those things done, because you can sit there and I've listened. We've listened forever and ever. We spent all this time, months, and now this. We're ready to go. We don't need a lot of time. And we'll get in there, and the minority is going to want to say, we talked about this, like, we heard you last year. We're done with this overture, and we're taking it to the floor day one. I would bring that out on the floor day one, and I would set the tone that we're a confessional church.
I think the problem, though, is that it's not necessarily the minority, really. I mean, it's not the affirmers that are causing the problem. It's the moderates. And this is the one thing that really bothered me, is this person said, we're not listening to our minority voices. They're not listening to the minority. Like, it's like if I got up there and spoke, and right afterwards she says, we're not listening to the Puerto Ricans because they're on my side. And I'm like, I just said. And
they never responded to the Koreans or the other people.
Yeah, exactly. It was so blatant, and it got eaten up. And Phlebas pointed out, he's like, they weren't straddling the fence, they just stopped the amputation. But in my opinion, that is straddling the fence, because the amputation was the part. That was the necessary part. And it was like, yeah, we're going to do this. But all of that talk means nothing without action.
And what happens when you delay an amputation?
Yeah, exactly. It spreads. Yeah, and that's exactly what we were trying to avoid, is that spreading.
Yep.
But they don't care, because they didn't lose today, and they're in the minority anyway. And if they take down the body with it, fine, or somehow they concede, they grab the House, great. They don't care about the body.
Yeah.
If you're part of the 26 and you really cared about the church and you saw it was 70-26, you'd submit to the church.
Mo, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
All right. In my estimation, the Synod will need a new president next year, and it should be a president that's either Korean or Latin.
Which that was last year. Last year the president was
well, you're gonna have to go
vice
back to
president.
Korean. You're gonna have to go back to someone who's not Dutch. Okay.
Can't we have President Mo? Let's get President Mo.
Oh, absolutely. Hold on. You know what Mo's tagline is, right? It's from Conan the Barbarian. To destroy your enemies, to see them strewn before you and hear the lamentations of their women. Okay. But the reason I bring this up is because, luckily this is on air, and I've watched Paul Vanderklay. Paul Vanderklay's in a grieving for his, but listen to Paul. Paul will talk about all these people he knows, right? All of them that he grew up with, all of them are part of his extended family. And eventually, Mo, you don't have that, or other people don't have that. That you're there for the confession.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm Catholic, but I'm a Catholic, not a cradle Catholic. I'm a Catholic by choice, in that I have to buy into the confession of the church.
Jacob doesn't count you as a Catholic because you weren't born into it.
Right. So what happens is you almost need someone, right? Who are the people that are the toughest Catholics when it comes to doctrine? It's the ones that aren't cradle. It's the ones that join the church almost anywhere. So if you want somebody who's going to be more of a, shall we say, church militant, it would be someone like Mo, who would say, okay.
The zeal of a convert.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because what will happen is you have these familia. Well, I can't break up with, someone from classes Neelan is someone I went to seminary with, and they're on the other side.
Yeah, but Mo pointed out the problem, and it's these people that are desperately in the middle, trying to hope they can save this thing together, and they'd love some sort of split option. So I don't know how the president gets selected, but my guess is that's where you can get a somewhat even moderate traditionalist or whatever. Jacob, pull up Phlebas's comment here that he put about Lloyd H.
Oh, yeah.
So at the very end, at the very beginning, they had a problem with certain people that were on the slate because of their positions. And depending on the decisions they were going to make about whether you were going to be a confession rejecter, they wanted to have a chance to make some challenges. They were told that after they finished with this stuff that he could do it. And then at the end, it was DeVries who made this decision. They said, oh, that's not what we did. We're going to do this. We've run out of time. We just got to vote it. So at the very beginning of Synod, they wanted to make a point, and they were told, we'll decide this and we'll come back to it. And then they ran the clock out on them. DeVries did. This was DeVries' decisions, and didn't give them a chance to challenge. So what they've set in place next year is people that do not agree with the confessions are going to be officers, or whatever those officers were being voted on.
Yeah, council of delegates.
So, I mean, there were, again, the lawyer in me playing the games. Game respects game. Like there was, boy, some good faith was given on the conservative side, and they got their knees cut out from under them at every level.
So there's a guy that I respect quite a bit who did a YouTube, Aaron Wren, on why conservatives can't govern. And I see this so much in every aspect of our society. It's because there's you can watch Fox News and you get the bromites. That's great. Now you got elected. Now you've got to understand what you need to do. So if Jonathan or Lance or Jacob or Moises got elected to a local board, the first thing I would tell you to do is read Robert's Rules of Order. Read it and know it.
Yep.
Okay? I would drive people crazy with it. I knew it like the back of my hand. Okay? And the guy sitting next to me was a Harvard lawyer, and he says, he would call me an a-hole every day, and I didn't care because I was there to win. And when you have a position, okay, when you are made president of the synod, you were made president by people like Mo, that you were to basically move forward with what the church wanted to do. Okay, the church had its discussion the year before. Now it's time to enact what we said we were going to do. And now what you've done is you have created a situation that I don't know if you can ever fix it. Because once you say you've got to do something and you don't do it, it's pretty much, it's over. It's like, and so I think that if I was to say, how can you save the CRC? I would say right now, the 70% that were there, say we need to have a special meeting if they could do that. And we need to get this thing done. And you need to depose Paul, just say, Paul, you're out of here. Put in a new president and do it. And basically say, it's over. It will be ugly. There'll be a lot of storm and drang. And you know what? It will be over and you won't care. In 6 months anyways, it will be forgotten.
Or maybe this is simply how the CRC functions, and a lot of people are. I mean, Mo is the only person here who's actually CRC, and if this is how the CRC functions, frankly, it seems to me you just basically have to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think there's one more bite at the
start
apple. Don't you think there's one more bite at the apple next year? I think ultimately the conservative side needs to try and make sure that they put someone in place who's going to make sure the questions come to the floor and they get voted on. As long as they get voted on, then there will be.
That's what they did.
That's what they did last year.
Right.
Go ahead, Mo. I want to hear Mo's thoughts here.
So I mean, the only way I see this like a potential way forward here is if a lot of that 70%, the class of the 70% are during the next year overly aggressive at pointing out the disciplinary aspects. So that what we're coming to next year is not just Kneeland and then we're figuring out what the gravamen means. It's we have everyone under discipline. Everyone from every classes that has an issue here, we're bringing them all under discipline. And obviously we would have to do that. The classes would have to do that. And then if it doesn't work out the classes, then it moves up to Synod. So then Synod slate next year is filled with discipline of these office bearers. And the pressure is so hard that ideally these guys leave before Synod.
So Jonathan actually went to Calvin, lives in Grand Rapids, and
Grew up RCA, which
knows these people in real life.
Half Dutch.
Yeah.
Or Fries, technically. I think I feel like we saw this happen in the RCA decades prior. I went to a church in Grand Rapids that broke off, considered joining one of the Presbyterian churches, but they were too liberal, progressive, and so I think we were independent for a while. It was some combination of women in office or something in my church's case, but so it's I'm sort of surprised that this has taken so long to do in the CRC, but you know, my interaction with it has really just been when I was there in college, and so the faculty and so the institutional CRC I know is around the university, which is not known for its conservatism, at least within the circles that I roll in. But I think even if they were to expel Kneeland or do all that, aren't we still living in that same bifurcated world? Isn't the CRC still living in that bifurcated world where you have the majority, the silent majority, the minority, they sort of live together harmoniously, but it's a symbolic victory if they kick the heretics out, right? And then it's just all right, now we're just smaller. And
there's a couple aspects of that. One is degree matters, so you get some of the extremists out, and then now we have a policy, but also the major growth within the CRC right now is coming through the Koreans and through the Latinos. There's big, I mean, and there's several Latino whole congregations that are considering moving into the Christian Reformed Church, and we're waiting to see how this plays itself out. And so it's one of those things. You lose Neeland, you make that up.
I see what you're saying.
And non-Dutch people.
Yeah.
And then you do have some people that will come back, or that may, that have left for other denominations as well.
Now, Mo, I want to help you here. So I'm the kind of guy that helps.
Yeah.
The Eastern Rite Church of the Catholic Church has married priests. So if it doesn't work out at the CRC, there's a great Eastern Rite Church in Aurora, Illinois.
Hate the colonizer.
Yeah, he is.
Yes, I am. You know what? Well, the Catholic Church teaches I need to be evangelizing all the time.
So for me, I think it's very key that Calvin, or soon to be Servetus University, is the epicenter. It really seems to be the epicenter of the CRC. And what's emanating out of there is not a gospel message. It's a message of wokeism. And if Calvin has become a seminary for CRT instead of CRC, I just thought of that. CRT instead of CRT.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use that, Jake.
Stop it.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what it sounds like it's become.
Well, there has been movement to try to reverse that at Calvin. And that process has begun. How far will it go? We'll see. And there's two reasons behind that. One is it's owned by the denomination. The denomination is starting to realize that's a problem. But also, it's a killer for enrollment. And they need this. I think it was the first year that their enrollment was back up. And this was the first year that they started implementing some of those changes.
Well, because from my understanding, Dort's gone nuts with enrollment.
Yeah, Dort's doing well.
Yeah.
What's Dort?
Dort it's another Dutch university. It's connected with the CRC, but it's not directly owned, but it's fairly conservative.
I thought Dort was RCA.
You know, it might be.
Or I'm thinking.
You know that, Jacob, one of the things that got tabled today, had they gotten through Committee 8, they had a bunch of things. Calvin University was mentioned as they were going to get down into 8. They were going to start addressing this issue. So again, all this work that got done, they were able to table all these things to start putting these things on the table, and it got punted. I'm
telling you, you need somebody like Michael Servetus who's willing to die for his convictions.
Sam.
If the CRC spent more time emulating Michael Servetus, I think they would be in a much better place.
Wasn't he Spanish?
He was.
Well, I mean, we do all this. Listen, like, again, I'll say this. The marriage is over before the divorce is. I mean, the only thing that works, you need to do this. Confessionalists go one way, affirmers go one way. Let the affirmers have a fully affirming church. That's fine. Like, if a whole bunch of people want to come around it, be affirmers, and we'll see if you're around in 10, 20, 30, 50 years.
It's very clear. It's not. We've seen this with the Presbyterian Church, with the PCA versus, and what happened? The mainline Presbyterian Church was basically dead. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
It dies. Here's what happens. Whether you're Catholic, Orthodox, Sacramental Protestant, or Evangelical.
Sacramental Protestant.
When you move away from, the Missouri Synod Lutheran, the Reformed Church, when you start moving away from Orthodoxy, your church dies.
Yep, it's proven. Over and over, the numbers prove it.
Right. Whether you have hippie Pope Francis, right? Okay. Whatever that is, it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is that being colonized by the world, sooner or later, you sit there and go, Is this all you got? Is this all we have? Is that it? At the end, my belief is that God is the arena and the agent. And if I don't have that arenic belief, it's all over but the crying. I have to have the arena. And the minute I say that God is just how I feel in here, that's a huge problem. Because I'm German. We've seen what the Germans do when they feel something.
Yeah, start world wars.
Yes. Okay. And honestly, my grandfather was a great guy to talk to about that because he was a pacifist that got chased out of Germany by the Kaiser. Okay. So you understand what happens when the world starts colonizing things. People do crazy things. We're seeing this woke stuff as just another crazy that we've seen the last 200 years. The real crazy started with the French Revolution and hasn't stopped.
Okay, back to the CRC Synod. It seems to me that this same-sex marriage debate is, in fact, like World War II, in that the first war was the women in church office, and that war was never it really was not resolved.
No, it wasn't.
And honestly, it seems to me like you're fighting a war without really talking about one of the most important parts of it, which is, yes, this egalitarian versus complementarian view really does affect your views on same-sex marriage as well. And it's funny, but I keep on saying to Paul Vanderklay, when are you finally going to admit you were wrong about women in church office?
Jacob, nobody. You are the best guy in our little corner of the estuary. You are, because you go right to the hard question.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, Nick was raising the same thing. He's on here in the chat.
Yeah.
And his thing on Twitter was like, I think we're seeing why women in office is a bad idea watching CRC Synod.
Yeah,
but
and the whole compassion being weaponized, I think that's a huge aspect of that.
Yep, and they're wired, and it's like that. It's that whole Myers-Briggs thinkers versus feelers. 70% of all men are thinking in process. 70% of all women are feelers, and that's that whole male-female dichotomy. And so that is that case. By the way, Hank, you'd have loved it last night. There was a gal who came up when they were talking about this, and they were trying to make their biblical claims or whatever. It's mostly the minority speaking, and she said, there's no clarity in the Bible. Like, we can't agree on the Bible, So and I was just for the solo scriptura crowd. I was like, yes, do you know you're in a CRC Calvinist church? Because that opinion goes against everything that the Protestant Reformation is about. It was a funny moment.
I would say it's the end game of the Protestant Reformation is this kind of deconstructionism, but that's just me. But
yeah, you yourself and the Holy Spirit in the Bible. Let's face it. How did we get here?
Yes.
There are natural outflows to the Protestant movement and always protesting and splitting off and allowing you, the Holy Spirit, and the Bible to make up what you want. That's how we end up. And I haven't seen Barna's new numbers, and I need to see them. But 60 million people had left the church between 2000 and the year 2019. 60 million in North America. Okay.
All right, gents, like a good CRC guy, I have a wife and kids, and I need to get back to them. Love chatting with you guys.
Yeah, I got to get back to work, but hey, let's do this again. What a great group. Thank you so much. Hey, by the way, Mo, we're still praying for you.
I appreciate it, Hank.
And you know what I'm praying for you about?
Yes, I do. I
do.
All right,
and Mo, I do want to say I've been kind of cavalier because this is not my fight.
Yeah.
I do have a heart that you're going to have to live through this, and it's not going to be fun.
Yeah, it won't be fun, but I think I'm used to doing a lot of unfun things, so the Lord has prepared me. Thanks. Peace, guys.
Thanks for coming on.
Okay, I think I am going to end this broadcast because people haven't been really jumping on, and it's it's kind of weird that none of us are CRC, and we're so like Nick's on Twitter. I pinned it on my Twitter. Nick's thing about how interested we've become in the CRC. I guess Jonathan naturally does have an interest.
Well-
I don't think I would have cared if it wasn't for PDK's riveting play-by-plays and his colonization of us, you know, to care about.
Yeah,
his...
I wasn't. The thing that I did it, so for me, really what it was is, one, I'm a church nerd and I've been behind the scenes and seen the sausage made, there was that. But it really was a mirror into our moment. Like what we saw play out was a mirror into everything we've been talking about, the cultural moment we find ourselves in. That was pure culture war stuff going on. It was, okay? So you're seeing that play out in a church context and with a small familial denomination. So for me, it was being on the outside, and then the lawyer in me watching the gamesmanship. Like I'm into that kind of stuff. But it was quite a moment to watch them struggle through this moment we find ourselves in. And I think it was very informative. And heartbreaking too.
I'm just very curious, as somebody who lives in Grand Rapids, has there been has there been real life, or is this just on the internet?
Yeah, no, it's. I don't even know if it makes the local news. Nobody's paying attention. I promise.
Yeah, but I think a lot of Protestantism is the same, right? Like I walk into a CRC whatever service and I walk into a Lutheran one, and besides some details, like the feel is mostly the same, you know? So
this changes, and I think it's going to start to change now, Jacob. When this stuff is going on at this level, the people in the pews don't feel it, but like my church, the Methodist Church, you start to feel it when the progressive gain control of the United States and then of the United States United Methodist Church, right? When they're trying to tell you if you leave, they're going to keep your building, and all of a sudden the games come up, and they actually, the United Methodist Church of the United States actually closed down churches. Like they would have to go to Paul, they say, oh, that's a dying church. They would close their church and they would take their building without giving them notice that they were taking. So this stuff starts to become real. The CRC is getting ready to become real once you start getting into the divorce proceedings.
Okay. I am going to end this podcast. Bye, everybody.